Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 188. Before we jump into our article, I'd like to announce that on Saturday, I'm going to be joined here on the program by Jen and Lisa from the Prince and the Pervert podcast. Now, I'm sure most of you who are listening to this podcast or who have been listening to this podcast for a while are familiar with their work, but if you're not familiar with their work, Jen and Lisa are content creators from Australia, and they've been covering the Jeffrey Epstein case for quite some time as well. So it's always nice to get different perspectives, different angles, and Jen and Lisa have a very, 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 very good program where they cover a lot of good information. So I'm pumped to announce that I'm going to have both of them here on the program on Saturday. So make sure you're looking out for that. Now, on to our article. Our article tonight deals with the appeals court that has sided with the federal government in the Jeffrey Epstein case as far as the immunity deal that was doled out in Epstein's first arrest. So we're going to jump into this article from Politico and see just what it says. The headline: Appeals Court sides with feds on Jeffrey Epstein deal. Author: Josh Gerstein. This article appeared in Politico. Federal prosecutors won what may amount to a Pyrrhic victory Tuesday in a long-running legal battle over their handling of the sex trafficking investigation into wealthy financier, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein, with judges coming down on both sides of the case, savaging the prosecution team over its conduct. That's nice, right? Words are win, though. Okay, you can savage them in your briefing or after the case or even admonish them during the case. But the fact of the matter is you sided with the federal government once again. Should we expect any different? Should we expect the federal government to throw themselves in front of the bus? I don't have any faith in these appeals courts for the most part, right? We all know that these judges are activist judges. One of the judges that sits in this appeal court is 90 years old. Another one of them, who sided with the feds, graduated from Harvard. And the one dissenting voice was the female judge on the panel. Shocking, I know. But, I don't have any faith in these appeals courts. I don't have any faith in the justice system at this point. The 2-1 decision from the Atlanta-based 11th Circuit Court of Appeals said prosecutors did not violate a federal victims' rights law by leaving victims in the dark as a deal was cut a decade ago that headed off potential federal sex trafficking charges against Epstein in exchange for guilty pleas to lesser state charges. So, you're telling me that the prosecution pulling an end around on the survivors doesn't violate law? I don't even understand how they could come to this ruling, right? I don't understand. I mean, I can understand how a 90-year-old man can come to this ruling. He probably can't even spell his name correctly at this point. 90 years old? Why is he still sitting on the appeals court? I'm sorry, but come on, 90 years old? Go and enjoy your retirement, buddy. You have no business hearing these sort of cases. The decision overturns the core of a judge's ruling last year that contributed to the resignation of Labor Secretary Alex Acosta, who was U.S. Attorney for Southern Florida at the time the controversial non-prosecution agreement was hammered out with Epstein's high-powered legal team in 2007 and 2008. Of course the federal government appealed the original ruling, right? They know that they were up to some scumbaggery. And they get it kicked up to this appeals court, and the appeals court, finds an out for them once again. I would say that I'm upset by this, but at this point, it's expected when it comes to appeals courts and hoping that they do the right thing. How many times have we seen it throughout the country when it comes to just about anything, any kind of issue, and one of these, especially a high-profile issue, and one of these appeals courts gets involved? You have a judge like, this knucklehead here who graduated from Stanford, who is just completely missing the whole entire point when it comes to this case, in my opinion. Epstein died of an apparent suicide in a New York jail last August as he was awaiting trial on newly filed federal charges that he trafficked underage teenage girls for sexual purposes. The majority on the appeals court panel said the federal trial court judge in Florida erred when he ruled that prosecutors, including Acosta, violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act by keeping victims in the dark about the deal where federal officials agreed not to charge Epstein if he pleaded guilty to a pair of related charges in state court of soliciting prostitution. How can they come to... See, and here's the thing, too. And a lot of times these judges are going by the strict rule of law, I guess you would say. Well, what does that tell you? Maybe the laws are wrong, okay? Maybe the laws need to be written by people who get it, people who aren't writing them so that they know that there's going to be loopholes for scumbags like this to get away with stuff like this, right? So, again, it goes back to the justice system itself being completely and utterly destroyed and broken, and how we need to overhaul it ASAP. It needs to be, it's a matter of national security, and it needs to be fixed. However, the 11th Circuit's ruling was far from a complete vindication for Acosta, as it found that prosecutors appeared to have intentionally misled victims about the deal, even though the court ultimately concluded that deceit is not illegal. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Deceit is not illegal. Folks, this is the federal government we're talking about right here, okay? The prosecutors who are in charge of making sure that bad people pay, supposedly, are the ones who flubbed all of this up. They're the ones that didn't tell the survivors what was going on. They're the ones that chose to lie. So you're telling me deceit is not illegal? And the court can't do anything about it, huh? So next time, if you're ever in trouble with the law, just be deceitful. And then we can refer back to this case and say, well, there's precedent. I mean, the federal government was deceitful. But it's okay when it's the federal government being deceitful, folks. It's okay when the federal government finesses things in their direction. It's okay when the federal government omits information. But you or me or your Uncle Steve or your friend or obviously survivors of sexual abuse and human trafficking, we don't get the same kind of shake. We don't get the same sort of rules that they get. We have one set for us, for the lower people on the totem pole, and a whole nother set of rules for the people who are in charge, right? And it's okay to be deceitful. That's all right. You can be deceitful with survivors of sex trafficking. No big deal. You're not going to be held accountable for that. As the prosecution, Acosta is an absolute scumbag. His prosecutorial team, scumbags. The state prosecutors, scumbags. All of these people involved, scumbags. We hold that at least as matters currently stand, which is to say at least as the CVRA is currently written, rights under the Act do not attach until criminal proceedings have been initiated against a defendant, either by complaint, information, or indictment. Judge Kevin Newsom wrote in an opinion joined by Judge Gerald Toflat. Now, Kevin Newsom graduated from Harvard. That's a shock, huh? I wonder if he's friendly with Dershowitz or any of the other Harvard boys. And Gerald Toflat is 90 years old. He has no business sitting on the bench, just like I don't think Ruth Ginsburg has any business sitting on the bench. When you're 90 years old, go and enjoy your retirement, your few years left, okay? Your mind's not as sharp. It's not an indictment on him personally. I'm sure at one point he was a great lawyer, okay? I'm sure at one point he was phenomenal at his job. But you're 90 years old, man. All right, you can't even maneuver yourself down 15 or 20 stairs without falling and breaking your hip, for Lord's sake. Really? And this is the guy sitting in. He's the head of the court. He's the one making these decisions and conducting how the business is going to be run in the courtroom of the 11th Circuit of Appeals. 90 years old? Because the government never filed charges or otherwise commenced criminal proceedings against Epstein, the CVRA was never triggered. It's not a result we like, but it's a result we think the law requires, Newsom added. Oh yeah, and it's always to hide behind the law. They love to hide behind the law when it's going to make them look bad, right? When the federal Department of Corrections is going to look bad, or if the Attorney General is going to look bad, or even the state's going to look bad. Well, these aren't the results we like, but, this is what the law says we have to do. Our hands are tied here. It's an absolute joke. The justice system in this country is abhorrent. It's built and stacked against normal people like us. And when people like Courtney Wild and Virginia Roberts and Maria Farmer and Annie Farmer and the rest of all of the survivors can't get justice because they play games and they use loopholes, and the laws are written in a manner that benefits the people conducting the abuse, we're lost as a society, folks, unless we stand up, flip the table over, and tell all of these MFers that we're done playing games with them, we're done dancing to their drum, and times are going to change. And I'm telling you right now, this can't go on. We can't have a justice system, and a two-tier justice system at that conducts business this way. Equal justice under the law for everybody. Newsom called the case beyond scandalous and a tale of national disgrace. He also ascribed fault in various directions, accusing prosecutors of apparent mistreatment of the victims. So again, words are wind. It's nice and all that you're admonishing the prosecutors and saying that they treated the survivors badly and it's a national disgrace, but what did you, Judge Newsom, do to correct that? You had this case in your office. All it would have taken is a dissenting view by you or the 90-year-old, along with the other one judge that actually knows what the hell she's doing in that courtroom. All it would have taken is a dissenting view from you or the old man Withers, and we're talking about a different story here. But no, Mr. Harvard had to cast his vote and had to cast his judgment along with Jeffrey Epstein's protectors in the federal government. That shouldn't shock anybody. It's disgraceful, but at this point, it shouldn't shock anybody. And the judge even swung at the national media for having essentially ignored Epstein's case for more than a decade, notwithstanding numerous reports about it in Politico, the Daily Beast, and elsewhere. Well, I don't think the judge is wrong about that. It's, Politico can say what they want, but it's not like they're sending swarms of reporters to cover this case. Now, the Daily Beast, I've said it from the jump, the Daily Beast has done a great job. The Daily Beast has really covered this case, and they have done it in a manner where it doesn't seem like they're scared. The legacy media in general, they have tiptoed around this case. They're scared of Dershowitz. They're scared of Indike. They're scared of Kahn. They're scared of Ghislaine Maxwell. They're scared of everybody. They refuse to do good reporter work here. They refuse to do good journalism. They refuse to chase down the leads. They refuse to write the stories that might hurt, as Nancy Pelosi's daughter says, some of their faves. And it's an absolute joke. So I agree with Judge Newsom in that regard when it comes to the media not doing a good enough job covering this case, because they haven't. Look, if they did a good enough job covering this case, I wouldn't have 500,000 downloads of this podcast. You'd be getting your information from the actual media. The dissenter on the three-judge panel, Judge Frank Hull, said the actions by Acosta's office constituted egregious violations of the victims' rights law. Thank you, Judge Hull, Frank Hull. Thank you very much. The majority's contorted statutory interpretation materially revises the statute's plain text and guts victims' rights under the CVRA. Nothing, and I mean nothing, in the CVRA's plain text requires the majority's result, wrote Hull. I agree. Look, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not somebody that understands the law like these lawyers would and understands how to navigate through it like they would. But I am somebody who understands common sense and somebody who understands that when a wrong has been committed, there needs to be some redress, right? There needs to be some sort of coming to Jesus moment. Because we can't let this sort of thing occur. If they did this to Courtney Wild, how many other people have they done this to? You see, the justice system in this country needs to be reined in. It needs to be reined in, and it needs to be overhauled from the top to the bottom. The decade-plus litigation challenging prosecutors' action in seeking to overturn Epstein's deal with the feds was brought by Epstein survivor Courtney Wild and another woman who remains anonymous in court papers. A lawyer for the women, Brad Edwards, expressed disappointment in the decision and vowed to ask the full bench of the appeals court to weigh in. Yeah, you thought Bradley Edwards was going to be knocked into submission by this ruling? You thought Bradley Edwards, especially after reading Relentless Pursuit, wasn't going to go as high as he can, appeal to the highest levels that he possibly can? Oh, you knew he was going to do that, especially when one of the judges dissented, and not only dissented, but dissented with fury. It is clear that even the majority detested the government's treatment of the victims, but apparently felt there was a loophole in the CVRA that the prosecutors and Epstein successfully exploited. Yeah, what have I been talking about for how long here on the podcast about the loopholes? There are so many of them, right? But you and I won't ever have access to those loopholes. Do you know why? Because we don't have $250,000 for a retainer for a lawyer, and we don't have $1,500 an hour to pay them to sit in the room, and then we don't have the money to pay the specialists and all the other people involved in making sure guys like Epstein are able to use these loopholes that are written into these laws specifically to protect their friends. Edwards said in an email to Politico, "For all the reasons given in the 60-page dissenting opinion, we strongly disagree with today's ruling, which leaves survivors like Miss Wild without any remedy, even for survivors like her who have been affirmatively misled by federal prosecutors. We will be seeking rehearing en banc before the full 11th Circuit." Bravo! Bravo! And you should, Mr. Edwards, and you should, because this is a case that should be overturned. This is a case that needs to be carefully looked at by the whole entire appeals bench. The whole circuit needs to take a look at it. Not these three judges, one a Harvard grad and another an octogenarian. Okay? No, we need the whole 11th Circuit to look at it and see what they have to say. And if they don't do the right thing, then appeal it even further up the chain. Because let me tell you what, something stinks here, folks. Something really, really stinks here. Newsom was appointed by President Donald Trump. Toflat is an appointee of Gerald Ford. Hull was appointed by President Bill Clinton. I don't really think that matters in this part of the case. Now, don't get me wrong, with some of these rulings with judges, a lot of them have political bends, and it makes me mental, and I don't care what side of the aisle you fall down on. I don't think that a judge should ever be playing politics from the bench, and that's not what I'm saying is happening here by any stretch. What I think is happening here, though, is there's definitely the loophole here, and the prosecution, Old Man Withers and Judge Newsom, they understand the egg that this is going to leave on the face of the justice system, and they don't want any part of that. So what they're going to do is this is basically them punting. Now the whole entire 11th Circuit's going to get a look at it, and we'll see what happens from there. The Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility investigation into the handling of the Epstein probe a decade ago is ongoing. Well, that's nice, right? But if we had a Justice Department that was worth anything, they would have already arrested Ghislaine Maxwell and the Core Four and all of the people involved. So we can't rely on the Justice Department either. What we have to hope for is that the whole entire 11th Circuit gets together, and we hope that there's more judges like Frank Hull here who was willing to say exactly what this is. Absolutely, positively egregious behavior by the federal government to not inform the survivors of the deal Epstein was getting. How is that okay on any planet? How is that okay in any courtroom? Now, the problem is, folks, the way these laws are written, and we have to hold people responsible, right? Our local officials, our federal officials, congressmen, senators, the people that actually make the laws. They need to be held responsible for making sure that there's loopholes for their rich friends to exploit when the shit goes down. I don't want to hear about these loopholes anymore, okay? I don't want to hear about it. Enough is enough. just because they have a loophole, they get out of this whole entire thing being overturned, even when the court knows that the federal government was in the wrong? It doesn't sit well with me, and the whole entire justice system does not sit well with me. The whole thing needs to be overhauled. We need it completely torn down from top to bottom and rebuilt, because this is unacceptable. I don't think that anyone who's following this case is willing to accept rulings like this in courtrooms by 3 judges when a whole appeal circuit should be impaneled to oversee and hear this case. So the good thing that we can count on is that Bradley Edwards isn't going to go quietly into the night. Bradley Edwards is going to kick this up, and we'll see what happens when the whole entire 11th Circuit convenes and they all have a look at it. Let's see what the ruling is then. As of now, it's garbage, right? Obviously it's garbage. We don't ever want to see people that are obviously in the wrong get off on technicalities or using loopholes, right? We want the people who are guilty of crimes or of wrongdoing to pay the price, like any one of us would have to. And that goes for federal prosecutors doubly. And if these prosecutors weren't forthright, if they didn't inform the survivors like we know they didn't, then they should be held responsible for that. And they should not be protected by their Harvard buddy, an octogenarian who probably doesn't even know where he is at this point. 90 years old? Come on. So hopefully when the 11th Circuit convenes and we have a full panel, we get a better outcome and a better result when it comes to movement in this part of the case. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, folks, until tomorrow, I hope you all have a fantastic night.